So my wife and I recently took a trip to Turkey. She grew up there for most of her whole life. And this was a really exciting experience for me because it's my first time going to Turkey, saw a lot of really cool stuff, yada, yada, yada. I can make a whole separate video talking about that. So we've visited a lot of old churches and famous mosques, and there's one very, very popular mosque in Istanbul called the Blue Mosque. I was there looking around, and there was a girl working there who offered to help me. She was a Muslim, obviously working at this mosque, and we were talking. And there's a chart they had there about all the prophets of the religion of Islam. As I was looking at the chart, I pointed out my favorite, who is Jesus, or in Arabic, he's known as Isa. And I pointed to him, I was like, that's my favorite. And I was like, because I'm Christian. And then she said, oh, well, that one's my favorite. And she pointed to the name above Jesus, above Isa. And it was the name Miriam, or Mary. See, they had the names arranged in like a chronological sort of way, like a genealogy sort of. And Mary, as most of us know, is Jesus' mother. She mentioned that was her favorite. And I asked why. She said that because Mary is known for her modesty and, for her chastity, right? And she, as a Muslim, this girl had grown up in Canada, and she used to cover herself, wear hijab, and she would often get made fun of or ridiculed. And she liked finding that the thing that she was made fun of that was super important to her was actually what made this character, Mary, celebrated. That story was really interesting to me. It stuck out to me, I think, for a few reasons. One is just really cool to see a personal story about what what is important to others, and you hear why certain things can impact people. But on another level, it was really interesting to me that although Jesus is the central figure of the religion I practice, Christianity, and the one I believe in, it's pretty clear that he and those connected to him had a very huge impact on other faiths as well. That story is kind of relevant to what I want to talk about today in this video. As I review a book for you guys, it's titled The Islamic Jesus, How the King of the Jews Became a Prophet to the Muslims. I actually stumbled across this book at the library when I was looking for a copy of Dune Messiah, another messianic themed Middle Eastern religious overtones book. And then as I looked at it and glanced at it, it really caught my eye. It's by a guy named Mustafa Akyol, and basically his premise in the book is to explain historically, theologically, and who Jesus is, and why he's important for Muslims as well as Christians and Jews. Going into this book, I already knew in my head, like many people might know, okay, yes, Islam considers Jesus a prophet, but he's not the Son of God, not defined into this story. And while that's true, and that book definitely agrees with that, it takes a really, really deep dive into what it is about Jesus that Muslims believe, but even more than that. So one of the things that really caught my attention was he builds on the work of scholars like James Tabor and some others who basically look at the historic Jesus movement. And basically the claim is that the movement started by Jesus created a group of Jewish Christians. Jesus' original followers are all what's called Jewish Christians. These Jewish Christians had different sects. One of these sects was the Ebionites, who apparently maintained following the law of Moses, the Torah, and they highly esteemed James, the brother of Jesus, who was apparently the leader of this new movement after Jesus died, but they disagreed with Paul. Now, a lot of us may not fully agree with that premise, but it's a pretty popular premise that a lot of historians have. He basically takes that and says that these Jewish Christians who revered James, disagreed with Paul, who believed in Jesus as a teacher and reformer of their own religion, but not as a son of God, but did believe that he was a special teacher, he basically says that that premise, that belief held by the earliest Christians is the original one, and therefore Islam's view of Jesus is consistent with Jesus' original message. Obviously, I know there are many Christians like myself who might find a lot of trouble with that and disagree with it. However, I think it's very interesting that what he does in this book is it's very, very well researched, very, very well thought out. He looks at the work of lots of secular, Muslim, and Christian scholars from across the board and throughout history to build his case and to develop his arguments, develop his teachings. And I think that there's definitely some things that I would push back on, that I would say in return. In fact, a lot of things that I have in mind, I'll probably discuss in another video when I talk about some of the apostolic fathers in the book of Hebrews. But I think it's worth noting that in this book, he's using a lot of research. Like, this book is like 260, 70 something pages long, and the last 40 or 50 pages or so are like notes. So he does a lot of research, a lot of evidence to back up his claims. And it's interesting because although I'm a Christian and I have beliefs about who Jesus the Messiah is, it's interesting to know what other people believe, and as he does this historical survey, how these different beliefs, ideas, philosophies have changed and developed and spread over time. He looks at not only these scholars, not only the Quran, but he also looks at the work of a lot of what's known as apocryphal texts, early Christian writings that are not part of our canonized Bible, our New Testament scriptures, but that have popped up in various Christian communities, even some considered heretical, some considered maybe more orthodox, but have looked at these different texts that pop up in these different cultures at different times. And one of the things I found so interesting and that I would recommend is it's really interesting to look at how he's mentioning these different texts and these different thinkers, these different authors, these different scholars, because it reminds me that the world is so much bigger than the world I live in. As he discusses some of these writings, it blows my mind because I'm very familiar with the Old Testament and the New Testament, and even some extra biblical writings that aren't in the biblical canon. But he also discusses texts, some apocryphal texts I'd never heard of. Like, of course, it's very popular. People know the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas. He touches on that, but he also mentions other books that I'd never even heard of, like the Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew or the Proto-Evangelium of James. Very not as popular, not accepted by mainstream Christianity, but still ancient and very interesting writings that have their own ideas and perspectives. More than that, it also gives me a deeper insight into what Muslims believe. The author himself is Muslim, and you can guess by the title, The Islamic Jesus, that he has a lot to say about Islam. However, when he starts discussing it, I realize it's difficult to say that Muslims believe X, Y, and Z about this thing, or A, B, and C about that thing. He looks at certain aspects of Muslim doctrine, and there are a variety of different perspectives on that. And as I was reading it, as a Christian, I find myself thinking, oh yeah, there's a lot of different perspectives on this too. Like, Baptists may believe something this way. Catholics may believe something this way. Presbyterians or Methodists may believe something that way. Okay, so why does any of that matter? I definitely have faith in what I believe. But it's really interesting for me to be able to branch out and look at these other perspectives because it complicates things and it challenges my faith, forces me to reconsider, forces me to grow, and it also makes me humble and open to what other people have to say. And shows me that things may not always be as simple as I think. If you're into apologetics, for instance, or into evangelism, I highly recommend you read this book because it shows you a more in-depth look about what Muslims think about Jesus. And if you're into apologetics, if you're into defending the Christian faith and the historicity of the church and of Jesus, this book is definitely going to probably raise some points that you may not have considered, or that if you have considered, maybe you've ignored, about the origins of the early Christianity and what these various sects and movements looked like at the early stages. And lastly, I think it's important for us to always consider that if we want people to understand us, we should be willing to understand them too. And it's always good to branch out beyond your perspective. And if you're a Christian like me, then that means that you think that this man, this rabbi named Jesus, Yeshua of Nazareth, who lived 2,000 years ago, that his life, his mission, his death, and resurrection are the most important things to ever happen in human history, in the history of the cosmos, and that and that effects like that, if somebody does that, that can't go unnoticed. And it looks like even if other religious traditions have interpreted or believe these things differently, that they've definitely been impacted by the work, by the life, by the ministry of Jesus. So yeah, The Islamic Jesus by Mustafa Akyol. This is one of the books I've read this summer that was very, very interesting to me, very, very fascinating, and it's not the only one. I've read a few other things that I definitely want to make videos about too, so I'll pretty soon talk about those and share those soon, so be on the lookout.